Shabbat Shalom. This is Daniel John Lee with Torah Restoration Ministries. The website is www.spiritandtorah.com. This YouTube is being recorded on the Sabbath day, Friday night, the beginning of the Sabbath, on February the 15th, or the 6th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar. And I have been just inundated with emails and messages about how my feast dates are all off. Daniel, your feast dates are off. They're off by a month this year. The rabbis all say that the Passover is going to be happening in late March, and you have Passover happening in late April of 2013. What's up? Okay, so I'm going to make yet another YouTube about the calendar. So the calendar that the Jews follow was created by a man named Hillel in the 4th century. So this is 400 years after the Messiah. And he made this pre-calculated calendar that really is not rooted in Scripture at all. Now, it's completely wrong. One thing I want to point out is that even the rabbis admit that they will never have the Passover before the spring equinox. Okay, the Passover always has to be after the spring equinox. It always has to be in the springtime. They will admit that. However, they don't also realize that Passover is on the 14th day of the first month. So if they're going to acknowledge that Passover, the 14th day of the first month, has to be in the spring, why don't they also recognize that the first day of the month, which happens 14 days before Passover, also has to be in the spring? You see, this year, the next new moon is going to be occurring on March the 12th to March the 13th. That's the evening of the 12th or the evening of March the 13th is the next new moon. And that is before the spring equinox. It's still winter time. And that's when all the rabbis are starting their new year. And then they're going to be having Passover in late March. But you cannot start the year in wintertime. You can't do it. And even the rabbis acknowledge that. But again, they follow Hillel's pre-calculated calendar. They don't even acknowledge the new year because they start the new year back in the fall on Feast of Trumpets, Yom Teruah, which biblically is the 7th month. So that's why they get thrown off so badly. In Genesis 1:16, we know that we have to use the sun, the moon. These are used to determine seasons. And we also know from Exodus and from Leviticus that the barley in Israel has to be Aviv, because you have to present a first fruits of your barley harvest to the high priest for the countdown of the Omer, for the Feast of First Fruits during Passover week that counts down to Shavuot. Now, in order to use the moon, we know that the new moon starts the first day of the month. But then in order to use the sun to determine the new year, you have to use the spring equinox. So you have to start with the first new moon after the spring equinox, and that will begin your new year. So that new moon is not going to occur until the evening of April 10th to the evening of April 11th. That is when the new year begins. And then 14 days later, you have Passover. Now, one very important thing that's important to see about this is that the barley in Israel will not be ready to be reaped, will not be ready to be presented as a first fruit offering until it's completely ripe. And on the day of the new moon that's coming up, March 12th to the evening of March 13th, I can tell you that the barley throughout all of Israel will not be Aviv. It will not be ready to harvest. See, a similar thing happened back in 2010, where we had a new moon that fell even later than this. It was on the 16th of March. And Nehemiah Gordon, he spotted some Aviv barley right outside of Jerusalem. But in northern Israel and in the Kinneret, there were whole stretches of barley that was completely unripe. It was not ready to be harvested. And there's a very clear command in Leviticus 23:10, and I will read it now. And it says, "Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, When you be come into the land which I give unto you, and shall reap the harvest thereof, then you shall bring a sheaf of the first fruits of your harvest unto the priests. Okay, and this is the first fruits that falls again during Passover week. So this is after they've reaped the harvest. Okay, well, barley is not going to be ready at all. Uh, it's not going to be ready at all. In fact, if you start the new year on March the 12th or the 13th and you have Passover in late March, you're not going to give sufficient time for the barley to be fully ripe and to be able to harvest it. Remember, all the tribes of Israel had to harvest it and then bring up a first fruit offering to the high priest in Jerusalem. And you don't give enough time for that to occur if you have Passover in late March. It's just not going to give the time that is needed. So it's all happening way too early. Now I'm going to post a link to this YouTube that has a very extensive article by another guy named Little Guy in the Eye, who has compiled a lot of different resources that shows from a lot of different angles why the new year does not start until the first new moon after the spring equinox. When always, every time you start on the first new moon after the spring equinox, you will always ensure that the barley throughout the entire land of Israel will be ready to be harvested and will be give enough time for the people of Israel, all the tribes of Israel, to bring up that barley harvest to Jerusalem, which was what was done in ancient Israel and which was done in biblical times. But there's a lot of other different angles to this that I just simply can't cover in a short YouTube format. So if you want to do more investigation, you can go into that. Also, there is a book, a free online book that Don Esposito just came out with this year. And the first 4 chapters very clearly articulate the calendar issue as well. And again, there's a lot of things that I can't go over in a short YouTube. But if anyone wants a copy of that free online book, I can send that to you. You just contact me through the web and I can send you that book. I've already sent it to one person who contacted me through the web. So there are definitely different resources out there that you can see why the new year will not start until April. Now, I believe it is very important that we keep the feast on the right day. Not only is it important because we need to make sure we're keeping the feast when Yahweh wants us to keep the feast and when the scripture tells us, but because we're entering into a season, 2013, where I believe it is absolutely essential for our spiritual well-being and for our safety and protection that we're keeping the feasts on the right day, okay? Because right now we're coming to a time where I just saw another YouTube where someone was saying, oh, look, Obama's going to Jerusalem before Passover, 6 days before Passover, and this is showing that he's the Antichrist. Look, Obama is not the Antichrist. He is a decoy. Passover is not in late March. That's a false Passover. The Anti-Messiah is not going to come forth until 2014. And trust me, he's not going to be Obama, because the scripture is very clear that whoever the Anti-Messiah is, whoever the false prophet is, he's someone who's able to deceive almost the entire world. And I know many people who have absolutely no relationship with Yahshua, are not filled with the Spirit, and they don't like Obama at all. So that's all a big distraction and a decoy. So for your spiritual well-being, to make sure that you don't fall into the trap of what's coming up, you've got to keep the feast on the right days. That's absolutely imperative. So don't follow the Hillel calendars. Don't follow Nehemiah Gordon, because like in 2010, yeah, he found a small patch of Aviv barley right outside of Jerusalem. And again, there was barley all throughout Israel that was not ripe, not ready to be harvested. So you need to follow the scriptures, and the scriptures are very clear. You wait for the first new moon after the spring equinox when the barley is fully Aviv. That way you're using the sun, the moon, and the barley, all 3 indicators, to determine your new year. That is the only scriptural way to go. Again, the website is www.spiritandtorah.com. Shabbat Shalom.